Welcome to the MI Hunting Podcast. This episode going to do a wrap up of my 2023 turkey season. All right, welcome to the MI Hunting Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. It is middle of May now, and basically the turkey season for me kind of wrapped up the end of April into the first week of May. Ultimately, I didn't get a turkey for the season, but part of that I'm going to chalk up to not putting as much effort in as I should have. But before we start talking about the turkey season, I do have a few things I want to discuss beforehand. First off, I do want to give basically a reminder to everyone that the application period for bear season and elk season is now running through June 1st. Again, this is your application period to put in for those licenses. Again, for the bear tag, it's a point system. You want to put in for whichever unit you're looking at. For me, I'm holding out and still stacking up points to be able to hunt a bear locally here in my unit. Ultimately, I know at the point now where I've got enough points where I could, go up to the UP and basically hunt any of the units. More than likely to be able to draw a tag in any unit I want up there. There's more than enough bears up there where, I certainly could take advantage of that. But there's just something about, the idea of drawing a tag within the area that I live and have grown up in to be able to harvest a bear locally. It has more of a draw for me than just the sheer opportunity to be able to go hunt bear. So it's probably going to be a few more years yet before I technically draw a tag. But again, it's going to be, I think, more rewarding for the opportunity to be able to, hunt within my area. And then also, it's going to make, I think, I may have a better chance of being able to scout more and maintain base station more frequently, having it be local than having to try to travel and spend a lot of time and energy traveling to get up the UP to do scouting, to maintain bait stations. So, I'm hoping that I can draw, sooner than later. I do have some big plans to be able to try to harvest a bear here kind of in my own backyard. And then for elk, I've got, for elk, it is a lottery system. So every year you put in, you have just as many chances, or you have this, basically any chance every year to be able to draw a tag. If you put in for your first year, or if you put in several years and have gained up points where you gain more entries. So it's just luck of the draw in regards to elk tag. So chances are slim for me for that one, but there's always that chance. So we're holding out for that. But again, now is the application period. You have until June 1st, and it's a $5 application for that point. So, you don't have a lot that you're losing out on to put in for that draw, anyways. At least for the residency or for the residents here in Michigan. I don't know what it actually looks like for if you're trying to apply from out of state. So I actually have never really looked at the regs in that regard. So. But if you're from Michigan, it's $5, and and you're really not losing out on much if you don't draw a tag this year. And the next big update, which is still in development stages, but I am finishing up the last few details of my website. So it's we're basically putting together the last few pages and getting all the last minute details put into it. So here within the next couple of weeks, that should be up and running. So I will do a formal announcement on that. And basically what I'm looking for, or what the goal with the website will be, is to try to keep everything all together for any content from the show. So any of the episodes will be available through there. We will have any of the video podcasts or videos that would typically be found on either YouTube or on Rumble. You can also route to the website to either have access to either the full library or the most recent videos that I've posted. We're also going to have a monthly newsletter that will go out as well. Basically, we'll have kind of reminders, basically for the month. So anything up to date, kind of like with this episode here, we're just a reminder of the application period. Talk about any seasons that are currently open. Talk about, again, we'll highlight some conservation type things to keep in mind or to put on people's radar, and then also hope to be able to add in a few wild game recipes. Basically recipes that we like to cook ourselves here. We're going to highlight some recipes that we kind of are kind of our staples here at home. So the other thing that I'm looking forward to is finishing up some last minute details on being able to have some logo wear available as well. Again, there's going to be highlighted primarily on the website, but I will make announcements on some of the social media platforms to where you can either get linked to it or have those available on those sites as well. We're going to start out with a very small catalog of items, basically to try to get an idea of just how many people would be interested in logo wear. I do have other designs kind of on the docket, so we'll see how this first batch goes, and then we'll proceed on with some of the other items that I have in mind to be made available for purchase. So we've gone through a lot of preliminary stuff. We've gone through a lot of the going through some of the type of products. Again, me being kind of the way I am, I've really wanted to try to focus on trying to make sure that I have products that are made in the U.S. Again, by doing that, it does limit the amount of options available. So currently, right now, we're probably going to have what I can kind of muster in regards to U.S. made, basic garments. I'm going to have them locally screen printed here. I was gonna have the full catalog be all made in the U.S., but unfortunately, especially when it comes to the hoodies, there's just a very strict limitation on the available products, and because of the basically the high demand or the limited supply or limited suppliers of U.S. made stuff, the prices are so high that I'm not sure if I'm going to proceed with the hoodie being made in the U.S. Just because I want to try to get something that is going to be somewhat cost effective for someone to be able to manage. Ultimately, if I go with this type of hoodie, it's going to be too expensive for me to ask anyone to try to purchase. So, but we're going to start out with that, and then as I continue to grow the platform and to be able to have more resources available, I hope to be able to make that transition more and more, just to be able to offer more American-made stuff. That's kind of just one of my things in regards to my hunting gear and clothing. It's hunting in the U.S. should be a U.S. based thing, even when it comes to your hunting equipment and gear and clothing. It's just something. There's just something that I think is important to me, and there's nothing more American than using American stuff to hunt and fish in America. That's just me. And lastly, the final thing I'm going to be offering on the website is a membership. So you can become a member of MI Hunting Podcast. So if you become a member, a $5 monthly membership, and you'll gain access to a monthly live show, as well as you'll get a exclusive basically discount on any of the logo wear, and that will be anything that I'm offering initially and any products going forward as well. So if there's something that you don't like now, if you are a member, you will always have that discount as long as you hold your membership. And then also, if you become a member, you'll be entered into exclusive members only giveaways. It's basically something that if you support the show, then I'm going to do what I can to turn around and reward you for that with exclusive giveaways with products that I use or trust. So again, I'm a couple weeks away from being able to release that. Basically, the clothing that I have lined up is going to be ran as a pre-sale. So once I do have all those products finalized and able to make a full announcement of that, they will be available again on the website, as well as I'll make announcements on the social media side. So keep an eye out for that as well. All right, and then before we get into the turkey hunting, I do want to stop off at the conservation news desk. I do have a couple news stories, so let's jump into it. All right, so the first bit of news comes from NBC 11 News, and that's kkco11news.com. Congresswoman Boebert's Trust the Science bill passes House committee. So basically, what this is a bill that she has introduced to have the gray wolves delisted again. So basically, what happened again, they were originally delisted, and then a federal judge went back and reviewed it and basically overturned that decision to have them delisted. So now they're back on the endangered list, and now they're pushing to try to get them removed from that endangered listing again. Sorry, I just kind of went in a little bit of a circle there with that. All right, so this is was published back in April 28th. So Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's bill to delist the gray wolf population passed the House committee. The Trust the Science Act passed the House committee with a 21-16 vote. The bill delists the wolves is being part of the endangered species list. Removing the gray wolves from endangered species list would give local governments more control over how to deal with the population. Again, currently the gray wolf population is untouchable, or once the species is endangered, is on the endangered list, and currently the gray wolf population is untouchable once a species is on the endangered list. They do not come off it without help without the help of new laws. So the county commissioner, Cody Davis, said the wolf population is thriving and there's no need to keep them on the species on the endangered list. So essentially what this bill is, it will force the federal government to delist basically, no. And he goes on to say, it would force the federal government to delist basically use good science and delist the wolf here on the western slope, which would be a good thing for us. The gray wolf is fully recovered. It does not need to be listed, Commissioner Davis said. All right. So then what the bill is quite simply to require the Secretary of Interior to reissue regulations removing the gray wolf from the endangered and threatened wildlife. To require the Secretary of the Interior to reissue regulations removing the gray wolf from the list of endangered and threatened wildlife under the Endangered Species Act. And that's essentially all it is. Or if this bill passes and becomes law, Secretary of Interior would have no later than 60 days after the date enactment to make a final ruling. One interesting fact is on that Section 3 that there's no judicial review. So basically what this is saying that once it goes into effect, that it cannot be under judicial rule. So again, basically once this goes into effect, if it ever makes it, is that a federal judge can't come behind it and overturn it. So that's essentially what happened with the delisting and relisting of the wolf, is that regulations said that they were no longer under the protection of the Endangered Species Act. A federal judge turned around and overturned that, this law would prevent that if it becomes, or this bill would prevent that if it becomes law. So I think, I kind of laugh at this once I've read it and saw what the title is. With it being the Trust the Science Act, this is, this is perfectly played political wise. As we all know, the big saying was for a good number of years was trust the science, trust the science, trust the science. And again, everyone's been pointing at the gray wolf, and that according to the numbers and the basically most of the metrics to consider the wolf recovered, we far surpassed that in many areas. So the fact that they're using the terminology or this title, "Trust the Science Act," is kind of a shot over the bow to the people that are rejecting the idea that the wolf is recovered and no longer needs protection. Basically, everyone's been hammered with the "you got to trust the science." Well, now it's being turned around as, yes, you have to trust the science that the wolf is recovered, and then I don't know. I think it's just a funny way that, or funny and very cunning way to present this bill to where it's going to be very hard to fight against it on the other side of the aisle, essentially. So I'm sure it will get some criticism by using that title, but it'll also, it's kind of a slap in the face a little bit of, if you don't support this bill, then you don't support science or the science behind it. So, well played by the Congresswoman. And, again, it's a very simple law. It's very straightforward. There's no, hidden anything in it. It's basically just a law that says that the Secretary of the Interior has to, basically follow through on delisting the wolves. So we'll see what happens with it. Again, it's just made it through committee, so it's got a long way to go yet, and it's also got to make it past the president's desk. So we'll see what happens. All right, this next one has made its way around social media, so you may have already seen this or heard of this story. This is from Sports Fishing Magazine, reporting on this on May 5th. Another world record bass out of Texas. So the 12-pounder caught by Leanne Powell would break the IGFA's or 12-pound line class record. This fish has a massive belly on it. So essentially, they go into talking about the exact lake that she was on. Basically, she was. Well, let's just go into it. Leanne Powell's already extensive resume has a new entry, along with race car driver, TV host, competition angler, cover model, is now a pending International Game Fish Association largemouth bass record holder. So basically, on this lake, she had caught this 12-pound, 3-ounce jumbo in late February, which she had already beat her personal best. Basically, she had caught a 10-pounder the previous evening. So they named the lake here. I'm not going to, but on this lake here, they do name this lake. So I'm sure at this point it's going to start getting some massive attention. I don't know if it's a private, area, or if it's open to the public. But the fact that there were 2 double-digit largemouth caught out of this lake is going to have some massive attention on it now. So basically, it's just kind of an awesome story about, basically this lady catches some massive largemouth, and that, it just highlights again the fun part about fishing, where, you never know what you're going to catch. There's been a lot of stories, even just from the beginning of the year, where there's a lot of massive fish or, potential record breakers already being caught within the country and even across the world. So, fun little story. Again, basically it goes into the story about, how she caught it, and kind of the, her breakdown of the events. So if you're interested, look that up, read for it the rest of the way for yourself. All right, so that's it for the updates and the news articles and the reminders. So let's get into my turkey season this year. So, this year I ended up drawing for, or actually I didn't draw. I actually bought over the counter for the second season here in Michigan, or here in the I guess Northwest lower. And basically I was like I talked about before, I was quite surprised about the fact that there were still leftover tags for that second season. In years past, I've noticed that, basically for that first and second season, if there are, typically there's never any leftover tags for the first season. That second season, there's only a few left. And they go quite quickly. But this year, there was quite a few leftover tags that were made available, even when I had checked up, on it the week after. Before I even purchased the tag, there was still 2,000 plus tags still available. So I don't know if that's a indication that there weren't as many people turkey hunting, or not nearly as many people that had applied for the first or second seasons and were looking to just hunt that last season, which again gives you basically the whole whole month of May to be able to hunt. But ultimately, with the second season, again, that ran through January from April 29th through May 5th. So ultimately, I did a little bit of hunting on the 29th. Basically, I had planned on hunting the whole day or going out first thing in the morning. A buddy of mine called or had talked to me, basically that week, and was wanting to know if I want to come out to his property, help him move some tree stands, and basically just kind of help do some work around his farm. Basically he's got like a 200-acre farm that he's done a ton of work on for hunting, primarily for whitetail, but he just does a lot of land management stuff as well. So I went out there, basically because this would be the first time I'm actually going out to his property and taking a look at it, which we've talked about several times. Me make my way out there to go check it out. But went out there, spent most of the day, taking a look at some of his hunting spots, putting up a couple new tree stands, moving a few of them to spots where they just weren't quite in the right location. Basically that same idea for bow season, where you might be in the right area but not in the right spot. So we moved a bunch of tree stands around. While we were there, basically he had a couple other buddies along with him that one had actually killed a turkey just the day before from the previous season. And while we were working, I mean, you could just hear the toms, basically around the property, just hammering, just gobbling, and you could hear them like moving around along the property. Well, whenever we move, you'd start hearing another turkey nearby. So, basically we had kind of contemplated, this pause, and I was going to do a little bit of hunting. Ultimately decided that we were going to finish up and get the last of the tree stands moved, and then I would, potentially hunt on his property that evening. We get done with the tree stand work, and then we grab a quick bite to eat, borrowed some hunting clothes, and then went out along the power lines where two toms had previously been killed from the season before. Get sitting, and wouldn't you know it, it starts raining on me. So sitting out there, again, at that point, I kind of felt like because of the rain, it just kind of shut up all the toms. I was doing some calling, and I just wasn't hearing anything back. It was, basically for the first like hour and a half, I really just wasn't hearing anything in response. No calling back to me or anything like that. But again, being part of the evening hunt, you never know, especially there in that power line, when they would be coming through. Ultimately, a couple hours in, start hearing some yelps up the hill ways. Start doing some calling back, basically mimicking whatever calls I heard and just trying to copy it. Just kind of matching the energy of those yelps I heard. Sure enough, about 10-15 minutes later, here comes a couple of hens into the power line, probably about 150 yards, basically uphill from where I was at. So, also in this power line, because of that power line, being kind of wide open, I was running a couple of decoys. I basically had a hen and like a quarter strut Jake set up. So it's definitely I definitely have that visual aspect in play. So if a tom did come into that power line, they had a good range of view to be able to see those turkeys and potentially come down. Ultimately, those hens, they kind of millied around. I'm pretty sure that they noticed the decoys there, but they just were not interested. They actually started milling around, feeding for about 10-15 minutes, and then slowly proceeded up the hill away from me, basically heading up going the other direction along the power line cutting. So at this point too, again, it had been a fairly steady rain through most of the evening, and that was basically it for the turkeys that I saw. I did actually have a doe sneak up on me because basically I was sitting near some pines and whatnot, and it was very difficult to actually hear anything moving because of the rain. And I just happened to, kind of let's look over my shoulder, and there's a doe probably about 15, maybe 20 yards behind me, just staring at me. And of course, at this point, she saw my movement, takes off running, and sure enough, another doe comes running out behind her, cutting across the power lines into the timber on the other side. And then, basically from there, I just kind of packed up, and there's a little bit of daylight left, and he has like several food plots around his property, so I just kind of walked the 2-track a little bit to see if there's any, if there were any toms, basically in some of the other locations. Ultimately, there wasn't any other birds that I saw, so that was it for the night. And then ultimately, I didn't get back out until the last day of the season, and then from there it was eventful, but ultimately, again, I didn't get a really good opportunity at a turkey. I basically started out with some areas where I had kind of drove around before and knew where historically I've seen turkeys, and there was some turkeys that were kind of showing up in the evening time on this old cut cornfield. That so I knew that there's birds in the area, but I just didn't have a full grasp of kind of what their routine was, or if they'd be in the morning. So as I'm driving down, probably about a quarter mile from the field I was planning on going to, out on a private piece that's a hayfield, sure enough, there's like 4 or 5 toms and then 3 hens out in the field. So, and they're probably about, I don't know, maybe 60, 70, maybe 80 yards onto that private piece. Adjacent from that is some kind of thin red pine that was on public that, I thought maybe that's where the birds might go, especially as there's still kind of like that misty, kind of rainy stuff going on still that morning. So I ended up pulling down, kind of parking the truck out of sight, and basically grabbed my decoy, and basically kind of, there's a 2-track that led into the property, set the decoy up on the 2-track to where potentially if the turkeys would cross the road and make it into the pines, they might follow that 2-track along. Did some calling to try to get the attention, basically make it kind of sound like there's some activity going on. The hens kind of responded back a little bit, but they ultimately were not interested in coming over to the pines, at least while I was sitting there. So basically I could kind of peek and kind of keep an eye on what the turkeys were doing. They'd move closer to the road, then they'd move further away, then they would move closer again. Ultimately that it just came down to where those toms were not going to lead those hens. I thought maybe there might be one that might break off from the rest of them and try to sneak over to where I was calling, and efforts to try to catch this hen, essentially this hen that's calling, and maybe break off and see if he can't take advantage of that. Ultimately never happened. They just would not leave those hens, and the hens would not come over. So after a while, I decided I'm just going to pack it up, leave these birds because I just didn't feel like they were going to make it over there. Actually, at this point, starting to make it further and further onto the private property, away from the public land. So, figured pack it up. Ultimately, headed down to uh, the farm where I typically deer hunt, and basically kind of the same thing. As I'm getting closer, I'm probably about a half mile away. Group of about 5 toms and 3 hens, or 2 hens, I think it was. And sure enough, they're all grouped up again. And ultimately, just like, all right, well, maybe there might be some more toms hanging out on the property. So I make it down to the farm, and nothing. I do some calling. There's no, I'm not visually finding any sign of any turkeys. I'm not hearing any calling back or any gobbles. So I basically kind of check both the top and bottom fields. Really no action, and basically sitting there thinking like, well, those the birds are half mile away. They might make it over, or they could go a completely different direction or hang out where they're at. Who knows? So after hanging out there for a while, I ultimately decide I'm just gonna pack it up from there as well, and kind of keep checking public land pieces on my way back towards getting closer to home. So I was thinking, if worst case scenario, I'll hunt on the edge or near that cornfield where I know that those turkeys have been the past few evenings. So ultimately, come find out after talking to the landowner, after a few days after, he did confirm that yeah, there was toms in the field that evening. So it did appear as though those toms had made their way over to the property. It was just one of those deals of if I waited out, maybe they would have shown up, or maybe they wouldn't have. So I just kept driving, taking a bunch of different 2-track side roads, basically just kind of looking anywhere where I had a spot where I had either seen turkeys before in the past, or anywhere that looked kind of promising. I would do a little bit of calling and see if I got any responses back. Ultimately made it all the way back to kind of the same row where I had been before. As I'm going through, there's that same group of turkeys. Now they're only about 40 yards off the side of the road, and basically looking like they're going to come back onto the public land, as they were all kind of facing that direction. It seemed like they were slowly moving that direction. So pull the truck over aside again, tuck it back up into the trees, and go to get set up again. As I'm getting set up, basically on this 2-track again, I'm just about to get settled in my spot. I look up, and about another 100 yards into the woods, there's another group of hunters. So, at that point, it's like, you know what? It seems like these guys are going to be, trying to hunt these birds as well. I'm just going to pack it up and, call it. I felt kind of sheepish, the fact that, I'd gotten all set up and didn't finally realize that those guys were there. But what are you going to do? So I pack it up and then go to start moving on. Sure enough, as I'm starting to pull up to the other cornfield, there's there's turkeys in the field. And then sure enough, there's another group of vehicles that are pulling up down the 2-track as if they're going to start hunting those birds as well. So end up going down to the next 2-track, continue to drive around, and basically just never really found any more birds to go after for the rest of the day. This part is starting to get into the afternoon at this point, and ultimately I just decided it was probably going to just time to be packing up and just kind of call it a day. So because I did have a lot of extra stuff I was working on over that weekend, so I figure it just wasn't my luck. And certainly something that I was thinking for most of the day is that if I would have put in more time scouting, things might have turned out a little bit differently. But it is what it is in that regard. It really just came down to that. It really seemed like things were really hot and heavy for those turkeys. It's been a while since I've seen them all grouped up that much. Typically when I've been hunting, I might catch, 1 or 2 Z's, or, a couple times with a hen. or a lot of times catch those lone toms out cruising midday. It just seemed like they were just, they would not leave those hens, and they were all grouped up. At basically every location I went where I saw turkeys, they were all in a big group, and it was just basically one of those deals that if they weren't where you could hunt them right away, the only way that you're gonna get them to come over is if those hens brought the toms with them. Ultimately, I ended up talking with a friend of mine that he had just got his turkey for this last season, and he kind of ran into the same situation where the hens just wouldn't commit, or if they did, basically the one time that he did have the hens come in, basically the two toms that are with them just kind of bailed and didn't follow them at this point. So it definitely seemed like their minds has kind of changed where they are willing to bail away from those hens than what they weren't willing to do during the second season. So ultimately, didn't get a turkey this year, but you know what? It's probably one of the more action-packed seasons I had in the past couple of years. The first two seasons I hunted, I ended up getting turkeys, basically on day one, and then from there it's been kind of a dry spell, so where I just kind of struggled. Again, part of that is because of me being newer when it comes to turkey hunting. I just never really did much of it in years past, and then also it just comes down to a lot of it. I'm just not putting in as much effort as I probably should be in regards to scouting and doing prep work of making sure that I have areas that I know that I have good opportunities with. But there's always next year. We'll try again. But at this point, it's really the transition now to where I'm starting to get whitetail on the brain. It's basically the time frame where I'm going to start, really getting things prepped and ready to go for my spring/summer food plot / cover crops. We're going to make some investments where we're going to basically get a new cultipacker / roller crimper. We're going to try doing some of that this year. We don't know if we're going to be able to have it in time for the spring planting, but certainly by the fall planting, we're going to try a roller crimper to be able to cut down on our herbicide use. Because again, the price for glyphosate is way up there. And again, as I've learned, it's not good for your soil. It actually binds up some of your micronutrients. So again, the idea is to try to move away from that glyphosate, away from herbicide use as much as possible, to where it's better for the environment, better for the plants, and ultimately going to save some money in the long run. In theory, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, we're at that point now where it's that the food plot season starting to wrap or get kind of going. And then, I've got my trail cameras. I gotta start getting batteries for it, get those up and running, because a lot of the bucks now are really starting to develop. And we've only got a few months left, and then it'll be time for deer hunting. Again, my oldest daughter, she's actually taken an interest in trying to hunt deer this year, so we're going to start working with her. Basically, we've got the crossbow, and we've got basically we can go out for the youth season with either a rifle or a bow, so we'll see how that goes. Ultimately, we're going to start practicing just with the old pellet gun, get her comfortable, start working with gun safety, and then slowly progress to the 22, and then maybe a 410, and then we'll just keep building up and see how she feels in regards to using a firearm. And then also we'll start practicing with a crossbow if that's the route we're going to take. But she's really excited to give it a shot because she, again, found out just how much she loves the taste of canned venison. So that's going to be probably the bulk of what, if she gets the deer, that's what we're going to make out of it. So we have plenty of that so we don't run out within the first couple weeks. Other than that, I mean, it's basically getting stuff ready down at the property. I did a bunch of work doing some invasive species removal. Basically, there's a massive amount of bush honeysuckle and autumn olive down on the hunting property, so I've been working on clearing that out. Again, it's a lot worse than I thought in some areas where it's very slow going. There's a lot of plants. Basically having to cut them all down, use some herbicide to kind of kill that root system so they can't come back as easily. So still plenty of work to do there. It's kind of one of those things where I'm probably never going to fully get rid of those invasives. But if I can keep them cut back and, kind of slow their growth a little bit, maybe some of the other plants might have a chance, get some diversity in there, and where it won't become a problem, or even more of a problem, I guess I should say. Yeah, and then the next big thing is getting out and doing some fishing. I mean, I took my kids out just this past week, gone out, did a little bit of fishing. Unfortunately, we caught kind of the front end of a cold front, and it seemed like that really shut the fish down. My one daughter caught a really nice bluegill, and then the other daughter caught, a small bass basically. And then I didn't catch anything. I was working on trying to target some pike, and basically the only thing I caught was a massive snag where I ended up having to break my line off because I could not release it. So that's all I caught. But gonna be going out there doing some more. Hopefully I can get out at least a couple of times before the water temperature gets too warm and those pikes start moving out deep. I do really want to try to get them when they're still up in the shallows. I've done a little bit different with my rigging, which I think I'll cover on another episode of, kind of my tackle and my setup for going after the pike this year. Yeah, it's definitely it seems like a really fun time this year where I'm actually quite excited about all the opportunities. Other than just having that whitetail mind kind of take over and that be my only focus and being worried about all the different components to it. I am kind of looking at the rain forecast and seeing that it's not really matching up with my desired time frame to plant, but I'm actually not that concerned about it. I'm just going to kind of play that by ear and plant when it looks like the opportunity is the best, and then just be prepared for the fall planting. So, but I think that's a wrap on this episode. Again, thank you for tuning in. Be on the lookout for an update on the website and the things to come for the show. So I'm really excited about it. I hope that everyone checks it out and becomes a member. Because basically that membership is going to be used to be able to put money back into the program, into the show, to be able to expand more, do more, and hopefully provide better content going forward. So if you like the show, certainly consider supporting it by becoming a member once it becomes up and running. So, all right, thanks for listening, and as always, get out there, be safe, and have fun.